December 8, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Oahu, territory of Hawaii. The morning sun rises behind Diamond Head, cutting through smoke still pouring from the wrecks along Battleship Row. The harbor is quiet now, eerily so. The sounds of screaming metal, detonations, and anti-aircraft guns have faded into the low hum of generators, the distant thump of pumps, and the sobering splash of boots in oil-slicked water. On the quarterdeck of the USS California, BB-44, the air smells of diesel, salt, and death. Crewmen move slowly, their faces blackened by soot. They haul hoses, drag timbers, and sift through the twisted remnants of the deck, searching for anything that still breathes. A young sailor, Seaman First Class Raymond Gill, wipes grime from his eyes and stares into the oily water below. He can still see the bubbles rising from compartments beneath him. "They're still down there," he murmurs. A diver nearby adjusts his Mark V helmet, the thick brass and glass gleaming faintly in the murky light. "Aye," the diver answers, his voice muffled, "and they're waiting on us." Across the harbor, the USS West Virginia, BB-48, lists heavily to port, her hull punctured by at least 7 torpedoes. Her decks are half submerged, her flag burned but still faintly visible, clinging to its mast in defiance. On her bridge, smoke curls around the collapsed superstructure like mourning shrouds. The Navy Yard buzzes with activity. Civilians, engineers, and sailors swarm the docks, faces grim but determined. Among them walks Captain Homer N. Wallen, the man who will soon become known as the Salvage King of Pearl Harbor. He stops at the edge of the quay, his eyes tracing the wrecks from the Arizona's burning tomb to the half-sunken California. "Gentlemen," he says to his officers, his voice low but firm, "they think we're finished. Let's prove them wrong." In Tokyo that same morning, radio reports from Hawaii reach Admiral Yorosuke Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the attack. His staff celebrates. The enemy's Pacific fleet, they claim, lies in ruins. "The Americans have no fleet left to fight with," one aide says confidently. Yamamoto remains silent, pipe between his teeth, eyes on a map of the Pacific. "You do not understand," he says finally, almost to himself. "We have awakened something that cannot be sunk." Back in Hawaii, cranes groan as cables tighten. Divers descend into black water where daylight cannot reach. Inside the compartments of the West Virginia, the pressure is immense, and the smell of trapped oil fills the lungs. Some of the bodies are never found, but the ship's heart will beat again. By dusk, the fires are out. The harbor glows red with sunset and fuel, and the sound of hammers and saws replaces that of gunfire. America has buried its dead. Now it begins to raise its fallen steel. December 20th, 1941, Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. The harbor is still black with oil. Seagulls no longer circle. Even nature seems reluctant to return. But along Battleship Row, the sound of air compressors, cranes, and acetylene torches now fills the air. America's answer to devastation has begun, not with speeches or parades, but with the grind of wrenches and the hiss of steam. Captain Homer N. Wallen, head of the new Salvage Division, stands at the end of Pier 1, clipboard in hand. The task before him borders on madness. 12 wrecked ships, 4 capsized, 7 sunk outright. Some lie twisted to their keels, others burned to skeletal husks. Wallen doesn't flinch. "We'll raise everyone we can," he says simply. His team, hundreds of divers, shipfitters, electricians, and civilian engineers, nod in silence. The enormity of it needs no more words. At berth F6, the USS California, BB-44, sits motionless, her deck still submerged. Her crew calls her the Old Prune Barge, a term of affection, but now she is more ghost than ship. Divers work in 12-hour shifts, slipping into the Mark V diving suits, their lead boots thudding on the deck before they vanish beneath the surface. They descend into a nightmare world, ink-black water thick with oil, jagged steel, and the bodies of shipmates still trapped below. A diver's voice crackles through the surface phone. Visibility, less than 6 inches. Feels like grease. Another pause. Bulkheads cracked, still taking water. Wallen listens, scribbles notes, and signals the pumps to hold. The divers return with oil-soaked hands and haunted eyes. But by nightfall, They're ready to go back in. Each day brings a grim rhythm. Seal, pump, patch, repeat. Massive cofferdams, watertight steel boxes, are welded over torpedo holes. Pumps roar to life, sucking out thousands of tons of seawater. The mud at the harbor's bottom clings like cement, but slowly, inch by inch, the California rises. Across the channel, the USS West Virginia, BB-48, rests in deeper water, her hull torn wide open. Salvage engineers face an impossible choice: leave her as a monument or attempt resurrection. Wallen refuses defeat. He orders 20,000 cubic feet of compressed air pumped into sealed compartments while divers bolt plates across the hull breaches. Weeks pass. Then one morning, under the bright Hawaiian sun, the West Virginia stirs. Just a tremor at first, then a long metallic groan as trapped air lifts her from the silt. Men on the docks cheer. Oil sheens ripple out like black rainbows as the ship shudders free. For the first time since December 7th, the stars and stripes rise again above her mast. Far across the Pacific, in a radio room aboard the Japanese battleship Nagato, a report arrives. American salvage operations proceeding. Several vessels refloated. Officers exchange uneasy glances. Admiral Yamamoto, still at sea, hears the news days later. He sets his teacup down and frowns. They were supposed to mourn, not rebuild. Back at Pearl Harbor, work continues into the night. Electric lights line the piers. Sparks fly as welders repair armor belts. The heat of torches mingles with the sweet rot of oil and seawater. Sailors sleep in hammocks strung between cranes, their uniforms stiff with salt. By February 1942, the California's pumps finally win. Water gurgles from her last compartments, and she floats again, battered but alive. Engineers cheer, some crying openly. Captain Wallen looks on, hands in his pockets, face illuminated by the glow of work lamps. She's not pretty, but she'll fight again, he says quietly. The shipyard erupts in applause. The sound echoes across the harbor. Defiance given form. America's heart still beats, in its rhythm is the grind of machinery, the clang of steel, the thunder of resurrection. In the coming months, the fleet will rise one by one. West Virginia, Nevada, California, and Pennsylvania. Each reborn ship becomes a symbol, not of survival, but of vengeance. And in Tokyo, Japanese admirals begin to realize the truth. They had not destroyed the Pacific Fleet. They had forged it anew. March 1942, Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. Dawn breaks pale over the masts of cranes rising like skeletons above the harbor. The once silent water now churns with barges, floating dry docks, and pump vessels, their engines growling in mechanical chorus. Welders' torches cut through the mist, hissing white-hot against torn armor plates. Sparks fall like orange snow. Captain Homer N. Wallen walks along the catwalk, spanning the USS West Virginia's hull. Her decks are warped and pitted, but she floats now, held upright by air pressure and sheer stubborn will. Below him, teams of shipfitters hammer rivets into new steel patches, while divers' air hoses writhe like living things across the deck. The acrid scent of molten metal mingles with the heavy sweetness of oil and seawater. Pressure steady at 60 psi. Forward compartments dry. Wallen nods. Keep it there. We can't afford another list. He glances across the harbor where USS Nevada already stands half-repaired in dry dock. The ship that refused to sink on December 7th is now being scraped, plated, and rewired for war. Each strike of a hammer sounds like a heartbeat returning to the fleet. Inside the West Virginia's lower decks, diver second class Donald Young crouches by a jagged bulkhead. His headlamp throws ghostly shadows across the compartment. He scrapes mud and twisted cables away, uncovering a faded stencil, "Mess deck, no smoking." The letters are smeared, but still there, still alive. He pauses, touching the steel as if greeting an old friend. Then his voice crackles through the radio. "Captain, you'd better tell Washington. This old girl still remembers her name." By April, the USS California is nearly seaworthy. Her hull has been sealed, her turbines dried and reassembled, her electrical systems tested under flickering lights. When the last pump shuts down, she rises fully on her own buoyancy for the first time since the attack. Whistles blare, men cheer. Even the grizzled welders stop to watch her settle steady and proud. Nearby, the crippled USS West Virginia is towed to Dry Dock No. 1, her sides wrapped in scaffolding like bandages on a wounded soldier. Engineers swarm over her like ants. They replace her twisted gun mounts, cut away warped armor, and scrape soot from her superstructure. Inside her hull, electricians rewire miles of cabling by hand, every switch, every light, every radar conduit replaced with fresh copper and rubber. By midsummer, the resurrection becomes a spectacle. War correspondents from Life and the Honolulu Advisor arrive with cameras, capturing the grim beauty of progress. Men in oil-stained dungarees posing beside open boiler rooms, cranes lifting massive gun barrels through columns of steam. Photographs travel across the United States, images of ships reborn, proof that America's heartland factories, its shipyards, and its will cannot be drowned. Back in Tokyo, Imperial Navy staff officers review intercepted intelligence reports. One, a terse communique from the U.S. Navy Bureau of Ships, mentions that the California, Nevada, and West Virginia are all under repair and expected to return to service. Admiral Yamamoto reads it twice, then sets it down. "They raise ships faster than we build them," he murmurs. The room falls silent. At Pearl Harbor, the transformation continues through the relentless heat of June. Shipyard workers labor under the Hawaiian sun, shirts off, skin burned red, metal ringing under their hammers. Women from the mainland arrive as welders and draftsmen, the first wave of what America will soon call Rosie the Riveters. They take up torches beside the men, sparks haloing their faces as they join the rebirth of the fleet. Inside the machine shops, the air vibrates with the rhythm of industry. New turbines arrive from Mare Island, precision-tooled guns from the mainland's forges. The U.S. Navy's Bureau of Ships coordinates around the clock, merging the might of American industry with the skill of its sailors. By July 1942, the California steams under her own power toward Puget Sound for final overhaul. Her once flooded decks gleam beneath a new coat of paint. Crewmen line the rails, saluting the harbor as tugs guide her out. Along the quay, hundreds of workers pause from their labors, waving as she passes. Captain Wallen watches from the pier, his face streaked with sweat and soot, and mutters, "She was supposed to be a grave. Now she's a promise." At that same hour, a Japanese intelligence officer stationed in Manila drafts a coded message for Tokyo. Enemy battleships recovered, full combat potential to be restored, recommend reassessment of U.S. industrial capacity. It is sent, decoded, and delivered. The admirals in Tokyo study it in silence. The unspoken realization is clear. America does not simply replace what is lost. It rebuilds stronger, faster, and angrier. October 1944, Leyte Gulf, the Philippines. Dark seas, moonless night. A vast silhouette moves across the Pacific, its flanks armored, its decks bristling with new guns. It is the USS West Virginia, BB-48, reborn from the mud of Pearl Harbor. Her fresh coat of gray paint gleams under bursts of distant lightning. Above, signal lamps blink across the fleet, spelling a phrase that echoes through the radio rooms. Battle stations, enemy fleet approaching. Below decks, the same heartbeat that once faltered now thunders. Boilers hum with life. Turbines roar with vengeance. In the plotting room, Captain Benion's portrait, rescued from the ship's wreckage in 1941, hangs bolted to the bulkhead, watching over his men. "For the skipper," says a chief petty officer, adjusting the photo's frame. "He saw her go down. He ought to see her rise." At dawn, Admiral Jesse Oldendorf's battleships form a battle line across the mouth of Surigao Strait. Among them are names once written off as dead: West Virginia, California, Tennessee, Maryland. Ships that had burned, flooded, and sunk beneath the Hawaiian sun now steam in perfect formation under a tropical sky. In the gunnery control tower of the West Virginia, Lieutenant Commander Clifton Spragg peers through binoculars. Target bearing 350 degrees, range 22,000 yards. The fire control radar, new and deadly accurate, locks on. He takes a breath. Commence firing. The ship trembles. Her 16-inch guns, rebored and modernized, spit fire into the darkness. Great orange blossoms flare along her deck. Shells scream across the night sky, crossing trajectories with those of her sisters. Within minutes, the Japanese Southern Force, Admiral Nishimura's proud column of battleships and cruisers, is ripped apart. To the American gunners, it feels biblical, vengeance written in muzzle flash and thunder. "For Pearl Harbor," someone yells through the din. The phrase spreads from turret to turret until it becomes a roar. In the black horizon ahead, enemy silhouettes shatter under the impact of super-heavy shells. The Yamashiro and Mogami burn until the sea swallows them whole. By sunrise, silence returns, save for the groan of cooling steel and the steady beat of engines turning homeward. The West Virginia, once a corpse in the mud of Battleship Row, now leads the fleet that will retake the Pacific. Half a world away, news of the victory filters into a Tokyo conference room. A young naval attaché unfolds the latest communiqué, reading aloud in disbelief. U.S. battleships, California and West Virginia, participated in the action at Surigao Strait. The senior officers stare at one another, stunned. One finally mutters, "Impossible! Those ships were destroyed at Pearl Harbor." Another shakes his head slowly. "Not destroyed," he corrects grimly. "Only sleeping." For Admiral Yamamoto, already dead for more than a year, the irony would have been clear. He had warned his government that Japan could not win a long war against a nation capable of turning its dead into weapons. His ghost seems to haunt every meeting room now, whispering through the silence, "I fear all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant." Back in Hawaii, 1945, the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard hums again, but this time with victory instead of recovery. Cranes rest idle. Workers lean on railings, listening to the radio as the news from Leyte, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa rolls in. Many of them were there on the first day, when the harbor burned and the air smelled of cordite and despair. Now they hear that the ships they raised have avenged their fallen brothers. At sunset, a bugler stands at the edge of Ford Island and plays taps. The notes drift across the still water, echoing against the rebuilt hulls. The harbor, once a graveyard, is now a living symbol, a monument to resilience forged in oil and salt. As the camera of history pulls back, the message is unmistakable. The fleet that Japan thought it had destroyed not only rose again, it turned the tide of the war. The ghosts of Pearl Harbor had returned, armored, armed, and relentless. When the guns finally fall silent in 1945, the West Virginia anchors off Tokyo Bay, her decks manned, her flag snapping in the wind as Japan signs its surrender. The same ship that once lay broken beneath the smoke of Oahu now stands as witness to the empire's defeat. What began in fire ended in triumph. The sea that drowned America's fleet had also delivered its rebirth. And as the U.S. sailors look out over Tokyo's shattered skyline, one thought lingers like the echo of a wave. Steel can sink, but courage floats.